Hello? Rescue hooks to rescue, Mayday! Get ahead, West. Bad Mayday, what's your location? Get the hell out of here, hurry up! We need radio silence, baby. Water in that 2.5 inch line. 48 inch water in a 2.5 inch line. To the rope, to the rope. 35 in the rear, 35 in the rear.
Welcome to the Emergency Traffic Podcast. Welcome back to episode 52 of season 3 of the Emergency Traffic Podcast, where we examine tragic firefighter and paramedic line of duty deaths to learn from these events and possibly prevent them from happening in the future. This week, we examine the NIOSH report from the double line of duty death that occurred in Memphis, Tennessee in June of 2003. It was a commercial retail occupancy with a metal lightweight truss roof. Some valuable lessons are to be learned in this incident. It's just Denis and I this week, as everybody else is busy. So let's bring Denis in and start the conversation. Hello, Denis. How's it going?
Very good, very good. This is another Muppet Show issue.
Yeah, I know. It's Statler and Waldorf. I like it. Unfortunately,
Although feedback from our co-host is boring.
yeah, exactly. Not nearly as interesting as when we're sniping at Paul. Zach has a very important commitment today. He's getting married to Ashley, and Doug is at the wedding also, so that takes two of them out. And then Dirk is working a day shift, so it's just us retired guys today.
Yes. Sucks to be working, I'll tell you.
That's right. Yeah, exactly. And we're the guys that have time on a Saturday or whatever day. It's all my fault because I'm trying to fit it in between my numerous motorcycle and camping trips, and that's screwing up with the schedule. But
you got me because it's pouring rain. I can't work outside.
Aha. Yep. No tree planting or motorcycle riding today for you.
Nope, that's right.
And it's supposed to be raining here too, so that's why I'm home and have time to podcast. Well, let's see. What's new in the fire service world these days? You had sent me an article from Firefighting in Canada's news about the wildfire plan.
Yeah, it looks like the federal government is trying to coordinate an agreement, nationwide with, federal, provincial, and territorial ministers, to try and get the public, I guess, basically to be more aware of the risks of wildfires and to take more concrete actions on a personal level, I guess, to be ready. And I think their plan says, that 60% of Canadians will be, who live in high risk areas will be aware that there are wildfire dangers. It's hard to believe that there are people that are not aware, but there are. I know because I communicate with some of them on social media, and it kind of shocks me. I go, really? But we're in the business, right? So, and have been for years and years. So we pay a lot more attention than your average person who's more concerned about getting little Johnny to the hockey game on time. And but more importantly, I think out of this is that they would, the federal government is proposing that at least half of Canadians will take positive actions, concrete actions to be better able to respond to these things. Things like Fire Smart, looking after their personal property. And certainly in my subdivision, where we lost 1/3 of our homes to fire, and only one house in the entire subdivision had no damage at all, and even they lost trees. You don't really have to have a very long conversation with my neighbors to get the message.
But it's so difficult. Like I know, as a fire chief, I worked in areas that had wildland urban interface fire danger, and even last week I was with some friends, and they know who they are. They're listening to the podcast these days, and this fellow's got a beautiful cabin in the woods near Nelson, BC, and he's got all kinds of fire protection stuff set up. He's got a tank and a pump, and he's got hoses, and he's got all kinds of stuff. But don't talk about chopping the trees down near the house, because that's why it's there. And convincing people that 5 meters, nothing combustible, or whatever it is, 10 meters, and 30 meters, cleaning out, thinning out the trees, underbrush, and anything, nothing combustible, the wood on the deck, all that kind of stuff. is the problem, and convincing people to change. It's going to be it's an uphill battle. It's coming. Like there are some communities that have done a really good job, and it's coming, but it's a slow burn. Ha.
Yeah. Well, people have to take, at least two steps, right? They need to make sure that there's nothing combustible either on their house or around their house. So like covering their eaves, making sure the vents have got grills over them so sparks and stuff. Because the thing that mostly sets the house on fire is this ember storm.
Mm-hmm.
And there was an article, one of those CNN, or yeah, I think it is CNN, these violent weather and a series, and they're talking about the campfire that took out Paradise.
Yep.
And and I haven't got to the next one, but the next one I think is about a fire in the Yukon, but don't quote me on that. And so there's the ember storm that can light fires kilometers in advance. So if something burning lands in your gutter and it's full of pine needles, you're likely to lose your house. Lands
Yep.
on your deck. Some of my neighbors, their houses did not burn down, but they got dinner plate size holes burned down through their wooden decks. So
Mm-hmm.
they were just lucky that they didn't lose their entire house because of that. So that's the one thing. And then having large combustible trees next to your house, it's like having another house next to your house. If that house catches fire, you're going to have radiant heat issues. And people who aren't firefighters, for the most part, have no appreciation of what radiant heat is like.
Yeah.
When you
Yeah.
have 20, 30, 40 feet 50 feet, and in the case of crowning fires, 100 feet of live flame, the amount of heat that comes off of that would melt the face off of you,
Mm-hmm.
at a few feet, and will set your house on fire just from exposures. So, that's the two things you really need to be paying attention to.
Yep, it's easy. I mean, visit firesmart.ca in Canada or Firewise in the States, and there's all kinds of easy recommendations, little stuff you can do to try to improve the resistance or the resiliency of your home and your community. Can the fire truck get to your house? Can it get down the driveway? Can it turn around? All those kind of things are important.
But the reality is, in a wildland fire in the urban interface, the fire department is not going to save your house. They
In
can't.
in in Canada,
Yeah, when you've
in the states they do.
But when you've got you know an ember storm that's got half the town on fire at the same time, they just cannot handle tens and twenties and hundreds of homes burning at one time. They just don't have the capacity to do that.
Waldo Canyon, Colorado Springs, they saved 75% of the houses that ignited. They had
Yeah,
80 or 60 fire apparatus within 3 hours and a type 2 incident management team, and it was the
yeah,
most successful fire ever in the
yeah,
community, right? I mean,
yeah.
they did it.
But there were community factors there that helped them very much.
Yeah, they
And like I have security cameras at my place, and I have a film of the fire, and within an hour and a half, 2 hours of the ember storm coming through, all the houses that were going to burn down, they burned down.
yeah.
And so there was no possibility of the fire department intervening in time to make that, any saves of any amount. And that's a challenge, and we need to recognize that. Some homes they did save, but some they certainly did not.
We might not agree on that point.
Yeah.
Well, with the proper training and equipment, maybe they could have got in your neighborhood. You got nice roadways and stuff to drive in on and to turn around on, don't you? I think looks
They
pretty
they
open.
could they couldn't get in the roads. It's a single road in, a single road out. The roads were
Ah,
double lane with people leaving. Couldn't get the
right.
trucks in.
Yeah,
So,
yeah.
and that's another issue entirely.
That's an issue.
We're kind of preaching to the choir here with firefighters listening to us, but we can set an example as firefighters. So we tend to be complacent, and think that, we're used to this thing. It's handleable, if you will. But I think it helps if we set an example for our neighbors. And they say, well, why is he cutting down his trees? Well, it's to make my home fire safe.
Yeah.
Makes them at least, right?
All right. Well, we better move on. Something else that was interesting I found this week in a place called Lucy Lakeview, Texas, on May 19th. They were doing live fire structure training on an acquired structure, a house in a neighborhood, and the fire got away on them. It was really not a great day to do training fire. There was hydrant issues that they knew about ahead of time, and it was windy. They didn't actually have approval to burn the structure down from EPA and stuff like that, but they went ahead and did it, and it damaged the adjoining structures. So that was a bad thing. And there's also been a bunch of
Sounds like a
marine.
lawsuit to me.
Yeah, it sounds like a lawsuit. Exactly. There's been a bunch of marina fires lately. California, LA had a big marina fire, and there was one in Croatia too. They lost hundreds and hundreds of boats, and that's a big risk this time of year with people's boats and marinas and stuff. As we get out there, is our firefighters need to be prepared to go fight a fire in a marina and have the tools and tactics and training to fight boat fires in a marina, especially from the land.
And we've lost firefighters fighting marina fires where they've walked off a pier and drowned. That's happened over the years. So, it's not nothing, it's something.
Yeah.
And, and boats are high value, right? And they're jammed in there together. So you can have a pretty impressive fire in a marina. I've seen them. They're interesting.
Yeah, exactly. No, good point. All right. Well, moving into this week's episode, we're going to talk about in June 2003, a 39-year-old male career lieutenant, victim number 1, and a 39-year-old male career firefighter, victim number 2, died while trying to exit a commercial structure following a partial roof collapse. This happened in Memphis, Tennessee. And Denise is going to talk about the fire department and the training, and then we'll explore what happened. It's a great learning one. It's a lot of similarities with Charleston, where 9 firefighters died, to the similar kind of structure and some similar issues.
Yeah. So, the fire is kind of like in what we call a taxpayer, right? Or
Yeah,
it's commonly called a taxpayer. But this department, and we'll talk a little bit about the department before we get into the fire details. We'll talk a little bit about the department before we get into the details of the fire. So this is a career department and had about 1,500 uniformed personnel. So remember, this is 2003, right? So this is 20 years ago. And they operated out of 53 stations at the time. Now, the department served a population of approximately 900,000 in an area of about 434 square miles. So fairly densely populated. Now about the training of the department, victim of the firefighters. Sorry. So victim 1 had more than 11 years of experience and had successfully completed numerous training courses, such as the state's requirements for firefighter level 3, hazardous materials courses, forcible entry, firefighter survival courses. He was an emergency medical technician, and he had company commander training. So he was a qualified officer. Victim number 2 had more than 18 years of experience and had also successfully completed numerous training courses, such as the state's requirement for firefighter level 3, hazardous materials, forcible entry, firefighter survival. He was also an EMT, and he had courses in strategy and tactics. So these are experienced, well-trained firefighters. The equipment, we'll talk a little bit about that. So additional units had been dispatched after the initial alarm. However, only those units that were directly involved in operations preceding the fatal event are discussed in the investigation. So I guess those other units either hadn't arrived or weren't impactful on the incident. So Engine 31, who's a lieutenant and was the initial incident commander and a firefighter who lost his life, he's victim number 1. And there were 2 firefighters also on that truck, which included the second victim and a driver operator. So Engine 26 had a lieutenant, 2 firefighters, and a driver operator, again a crew of 4. Truck 11, which is a ladder, had a lieutenant, 2 firefighters, and a driver operator, again a crew of 4. Engine 27, who had a lieutenant, 2 firefighters, and a driver operator. Truck 6, who was on scene, had a lieutenant, a firefighter, a tillerman, and a driver operator. So it's a tractor aerial. There was a battalion chief who was the second incident commander, took over from the first engine lieutenant. And then there was a second battalion chief, who was Battalion Chief 11, who was the CD sector commander. So he was down in the CD area, so basically the back of the building. And Rescue 2 was on scene, and there was a lieutenant, 2 firefighters, and a driver operator. And then the Division 1 deputy chief arrived on scene. He was the final incident commander before the incident. So quite a lot of resources on scene, quite a lot of staffing on scene. I haven't added this up, but we're up over 26 or 30 people on scene at this incident, so quite a few. So a little bit of information about the building. This was a Type 2 non-combustible building. So Type 2 construction consists of structural members, including interior and exterior walls, columns, beams, girders, trusses, arches, floors, and/or roofs that are made of non-combustible materials. So in other words, either poured concrete, concrete block, or steel. The building was 8,925 square feet of space, which is almost 900 square meters for those who think in meters, of which about 6,600 square feet was retail space. So there would have been the standard retail at the front and some space at the back for stock and offices and so forth. It was not protected by sprinklers because it's single story, nor were the open web steel trusses protected by any fire-resistant coating. So it was the bare steel. The exterior walls were all constructed of 12-inch masonry blocks with a 4-hour rating. So the 4-hour rating really applies to between the units. A new roof had been installed in April of 2001 and consisted of a hot asphalt layer over a 3/4-inch fiberboard membrane covering a corrugated metal sheet. This is a very typical roof construction, particularly of buildings that have been built in the 60s, 70s, 80s, that type of thing. The flat roof was supported by unprotected open web steel trusses, commonly called bar joists. These joists were supported by exterior sidewalls and interior steel columns. So for those of you who are familiar with how this building would have been constructed, the ends of these joists would have sat on the concrete walls on a pad, and there would have been maybe in 2 or 3 sections as they spanned the store, and there would be a column with some cross bracing, and that's how these joists would be supported. So they're completely nothing else that holds them up, just the 2 or 3. Well, really for each joist, there'd be just either end. One end sitting on the wall, the other end sitting on a column or on another wall, depending how far the span was. So the joists were
Yeah,
supported by
yeah. I don't know if the posts in the middle even do anything. Not much, really.
well, you have posts in the middle because you can't when
It's
if you have a long span, your truss just gets taller and taller, right, and cuts into the retail space because you've got to lower the ceiling. So
oh
usually you keep your truss within 20, 25, maybe 30-foot span, not much more than that, and then you'll put a column in so that you've got a 12 or an 18-inch deep truss. That's all you have. Otherwise, you'd be into something much larger, which forces your interior, lay-in ceiling to be even lower. So generally, there's columns. And you go in a dollar store, or anything like that, and you'll see there's usually columns, and they just manage to hide them in the retail space. Um, so in this case, the joists were supported by your exterior sidewalls and interior steel columns, and the columns aren't large. They're like 4x4, 6x6 H beams, right? So, and those would have been unprotected also. So these buildings, the steel that's in them is not fire protected. It's not combustible, but it's not fire protected. And so the interior, the contents is where the fire load is. And when you expose these buildings to extreme heat fire environments, they're prone to the steel elongating, the steel changing shape and or collapsing. And we'll find out a little later on what did happen in this case. So anyway, the store was sectioned into 2 parts by a block wall with a man door for access between the two. So the front section of the store was retail operations and consisted of a suspended ceiling. So that would have been T-bars, which would either steel or aluminum with lay-in panels. And this suspended ceiling covered the bottom of the roof trusses. It's common for these lay-in panels to be, fireproof or fire resistant, you know, um, and some idea that that's going to protect the roof. But I wouldn't bet my anything on that because often they're damaged and or if the T-bars are not rated and so forth, it doesn't actually hold them up properly. And lots of times they're combustible also in the older buildings. Anyways, the suspended ceiling covered the bottom part of the roof trusses. So the discount mercantile operation in the front, so it's a dollar store, contained merchandise ranging from automotive supplies to clothing. The rear section behind this partition wall at the back was used for storage and also consisted of separate office space. The steel bar joists were open in the rear storage section, so no suspended ceiling, and that shared the void space in the front created by the suspended ceiling. So in other words, the partition wall only went to the ceiling level.
Yeah. So yeah, you see these, like you say, common taxpayer building. They're everywhere. Basically, not designed for big fires. The So we did our virtual 360 here again. So upon arrival at this call, the firefighters found a single-story taxpayer-type retail. It was called a Family Dollar store. It had a covered open front walkway area in front of the building. This area was on the alpha side, faced the parking lot and the frontage road. The front of the building featured 6 continuous large plate glass style windows with aluminum or metal frames and a central double entrance glass doorway. This overhang was supported by painted posts about 14 feet apart, estimated from the pictures, across the front of the store. The building appeared to be brick construction, which was visible at the alpha side corners. The ceiling to roof space in that walkway cover appeared about 3 feet thick on the alpha side, with corrugated metal siding on the front in the fascia. And there was two other buildings on the Bravo side. We have minimal information or photos on the rest of the building beyond some diagrams. As I mentioned, the Bravo side had similar exposures, single-story commercial buildings, exposure B1 and B2. The Bravo side, or the Charlie side of the fire occupancy, was deeper than the two Bravo side exposures. So the store in question was deeper. Brick construction. It had a set of double steel doors at the center of the Charlie side. No windows, just the 2 steel doors, probably for bringing stock and stuff in. There was a narrow concrete pad on the Charlie side, and then a sidewalk and the adjoining street behind the building. On the Delta side was kind of unique. There was a narrow paved laneway between the fire occupancy and then another separate retail single-story occupancy. It was a Watkins distributor or something.
It's interesting because this building, by its description with the covered walkway in the front, sounds like a 1950s, 1960s. What they started prior to that, most retail stores were individual stores on the main street. And then they started building these shopping centers and they were exterior like this. I remember when these first came in, there was a lot of excitement at the time because you could go to one of these shopping centers and you had a choice of a dozen stores. So you could do your groceries and buy anything else you needed all in one spot. Very popular, but they were all exterior, very much like this, and they had a covered walkway. So this predates, what we would now consider to be, a large big box stores where you can go inside and have multiple access to multiple different stores. So interesting. So this is probably a significantly older building. I also one evening had a fire in a building very much like this. That it was a furniture store, and these buildings will burn and they will collapse.
Yeah, well, Charleston, where the Charleston 9, it was a furniture store at the time. It was originally a grocery store, and they're all the same plan, like brick walls, steel bar truss ceilings. Used to be wood years ago, and then they went to steel bar to get a bigger span and less ceiling space. And they're everywhere, all over North America. These malls, and still in existence today. They're very common. I mean, some areas are tearing them down and building, Costco's and stuff like that instead. But
Yeah. So these are commonly called taxpayers, and the reason they're called taxpayers is so that the owner of the property can generate revenue. But
yeah,
essentially, they're throwaway buildings.
yeah.
They can build these things in a couple months,
Hmm.
and they're relatively inexpensive. So it's essentially a throwaway building. There's nothing worth saving, essentially. So we're going to talk a little bit about the investigation. So on June 15th of 2003, the date of the incident, the 39-year-old male career lieutenant and a 39-year-old male career firefighter both died while trying to exit a commercial structure following a partial roof collapse. So there had been a roof collapse while they were inside. At approximately 19:45 hours, so in the supper hour, basically. Central Dispatch received a call of a structure fire in a commercial occupancy with a possible entrapment and dispatched the first alarm assignments. So on that assignment was Engine 31, who was the first to arrive at the scene, and they arrived at 1950 hours, so 5-minute response time. And they radioed Central Dispatch to report light smoke showing from the roof and also in the building. So that suggests the fire was in the roof space to me. The lieutenant from Engine 31 who died in this fire, he assumed initial IC. The driver operator from Engine 31 began forcing the front door while the crew prepared to enter the store. So the store was unoccupied at the time. Engine 26 arrived and Truck 11 also arrived around 1951. So they arrived a minute later. Engine 26 began to lay in a 5-inch supply line from a hydrant to supply Engine 31. Truck 11 was ordered to the roof to investigate the air conditioning unit for a possible malfunction. Not an unusual situation to have a belt burn up or something like that and to be an issue there. Engine 27 then arrived on scene around 1952, again a minute later, and began assisting Engine 31. So Truck 6 then arrived on scene around 1953. So you got four units on scene within the first 3 minutes of the first unit. And they began to force the door at the rear of the building on the seaside. So these would have been the steel doors at the back where, you move product in and out and so forth. We've all seen these buildings.
Yep, makes sense. So the incident commander, which was victim 1, and the lieutenant from Engine 26 entered the building to investigate and search for the fire. As they mentioned, light smokes allowed the officers to see to the back of the store, which is approximately 100 feet deep. Victim number 1 and Lieutenant 26 proceeded to the rear without donning their air masks. There was no visible fire in the store. So there's a red flag right there. Nothing in the store, and you had smoke on the roof. Anyway, there was no visible fire. Victim number 1 and Lieutenant 26 entered the storeroom in the rear of the store to search for the fire. And there was actually a brick demising wall between the front and the rear of the store with one single man door in it. The smoke conditions in the storeroom at the rear were heavier, but still did not require the officers to don their air masks. Lieutenant 26 proceeded to the office that was located on the Bravo side of that storeroom. So immediately to the left through the door, there was an office. He heard crackling behind the office door, and he opened it to investigate. The fire flared up with so much force that it kept him from shutting the door. The fire originated, it was determined after, at the store's office and was later determined an arson fire. There was a fire to cover up theft of funds from the business. At about 1952, so a couple minutes into it, victim number 1 radioed for a pre-connect because they had gone in without a hose line. The lieutenant exited to assist Lieutenant 26, so the other lieutenant, exited to assist in laying a hose line, bringing in that hand line. Battalion Chief 2 arrived on the scene at approximately 1954, and he took over as the incident commander as per department standard operating procedures. Victim number 2 and the firefighter from Engine 27 donned their SCBA and advanced a 200-foot, 1.75-inch pre-connect through the front door. Firefighter from Engine 31 stayed inside the front door to feed slack to the interior crew. Conditions allowed the crew to see the illuminated exit sign at the rear of the retail area. Approximately 4 or 5 minutes later, Lieutenant 26 pulled a 2.5-inch pre-connect that had two 150-foot, 1.75-inch hand lines attached. So the old Cisco or the Y load that we're all used to at a gated Y.
Sometimes called a leader line split.
A leader line, yeah, leader line Y, yeah. They connected the two 150-foot hoses together after the Y to make a 300-foot section to ensure they could reach the rear of the store. He then proceeded towards the retail area with a firefighter from Engine 26. Heavy smoke was now coming out of the front of the store, and visibility was near zero throughout the entire store. So conditions changed rapidly here between finding the fire and that smoke going all the way down. Now, at the same time, the guys, and it doesn't mention it here, what was happening on the Charlie side, so maybe we'll find that out later. But conditions are going bad. And again, one of the things we often talk about on this show, residential tactics in a commercial building. We've got an 1 3/4 line here, and you've got a store full of combustible goods. You're not going to have enough power if the thing lights up. This is also similar to the fire in Phoenix, the shop supermarket store where they lost that firefighter. Same kind of thing in the back.
So there's two things I was going to say here. There are a lot of videos out where they talk about how to control the door. And one of the things that should have set off flash bulbs in your head as a listener is that the firefighter opened the door to the office where they suspected the fire was. The fire flared up. He lost control of the door and the door remained open. That should not have happened. And, that's one of the things is controlling the door. So my assumption is this door opened inwards. And so, like I said, there's a lot of videos out there showing you how to do that and recommendations that you carry short lengths of webbing and you put that on the door handle or whatever the case may be. There's
So you
ways
can
of
pull it back.
closing the door again. It says you open the door and go, oh my, and then close the door. And now you've got time to get your nozzles in place and do a aggressive attack. So that's a problem here.
And they
And
didn't have their BA on, and they did not have a hose line or even a can.
so lots of issues in that regard. Weren't prepared to find what they found.
Yep.
And
I've done it. I've done it as a chief. I did that in an apartment building. We were searching for the fire for like 20 minutes, and finally I suspected it was in the wall in the bathroom. And I had the guys, I told the guys, okay, rip that cabinet off the wall, make a hole. I want to open that wall up. And first thing they looked at me like, really? We get to do some damage? Yeah, rip that off of there. Second thing was they ripped it off, and I didn't have a hose line in that apartment. And I went out to the balcony and said, hey, I need a hose line. And of course I was a chief, so I didn't have an SCBA. And I mean, yeah, I've done the same thing. It's
yeah,
we get that tunnel vision. It's a light smoke condition. Here we are. Nothing's going to happen.
well, all I will say is that complacency kills firefighters, and I suspect a little bit of that might have been going on. If you got an overheated ballast that's smoking up in the overhead, the hidden
Yep.
ceiling. I can't tell you how many of those calls I've been to, in commercial structure stores, and you end up putting up a ladder and lifting a ceiling tile, and there's smoke in the space, and then you get out the tick and you find the hot ballast, and it's one of those, oh my God, we're still at this thing, looking for a light bulb, or a light ballast or something. So, the tendency is, I think, is to not think things are as serious as they potentially are.
Well,
And
I saw a post here on of Facebook or something a couple of days ago. I can't remember the weekly scrap on one of the other podcast YouTube things. Kurt Isaacson, and all it said was, "Expect fire. Every call, expect fire. That's why we're here. Expect fire." We go to so many nothing calls that it breeds in this, complacency, like you said. We expect fire. If you're going and it's 7 o'clock at night and there's smoke coming out of a building, expect fire, and these guys weren't ready for it.
yeah, I remember one incident that I went to. We had smoke in a theater that was in a mall, and they were in looking for it, and the guys weren't even packed up properly, didn't have all their straps done up, and just wandering in and out looking for whatever was going on. So if you've got to stop in the middle of a no damn situation to get all your gear on, the fire doesn't just lean on its hip and
It
say, okay,
doesn't stop.
whenever you're ready,
Timeout.
yeah,
Can't do a timeout.
it
Yep.
doesn't work like that. Just so you know.
There's the guy that does the YouTube videos, the fire critic, and he does YouTube videos of firefighters, and that's exactly the stuff he points out. He says, like, okay, watch these guys. Here, they don't have a hose line, or they don't have their straps done up, or the officer doesn't have his jacket on, or whatever.
Or masked up, or have his hood
Yeah.
on, or have his helmet on, or doesn't have his gloves on.
Gloves. You like gloves. Then he likes gloves. He's got
Yeah,
a
well,
whole stack of them in his garage.
yeah, actually I do. Yeah, you grab a hot handle on never mind. Moving on here. Anyway, continuing with the story. So, 3 members from Truck 11 put an extension ladder to the roof on the D side. Remember, this is a single-story building with a bit of a headspace above the canopy, right? And remember, there's a canopy on the front on the alpha side. So anyway, so they put an extension ladder on the roof on the Delta side. Remember, this is the end store, so you can access the Delta side. And they began roof operations when they were ordered by the IC to enter the front of the store to pull ceiling tiles in the retail area. So they put the ladder up and then got redirected to the interior to pull ceiling tiles. So why did the IC instruct them to pull ceiling tiles? They're looking for the fire.
Yeah.
So
First thing you do in a commercial structure is knock them ceiling tiles down. You got to know what's above your head.
yeah, is the fire at the front? Is the fire at the back? Is the fire on the side? Where is it? And remember, you've all been in dollar stores. There's rows and rows and rows of shelving, and the shelving goes most of the way to the ceiling. And lots of times there's cartons full of extra stock up on top of these things, again, very close to the ceiling. So pulling hose lines through that area when visibility is good does not mean you're going to be able to follow that hose line out again when you lose visibility. And also pulling roofing tiles or ceiling tiles, pardon me, down. What's that going to do to the stock on the shelves and stuff? You're going to inevitably be starting to knock stuff down into the aisles. You're creating a hazard for people trying to get back and forth. It's not a neat operation. So you're going to end up hooking some of that T-bar. You're going to end up pulling stuff down. You're going to end up, wrecking stuff where you thought you had a clear path to evacuate. You might be interfering with that too. So think about all of these things. You got a bunch of guys in the back with hose lines. They didn't come in the Charlie side. They came in the Alpha side with the line. So think about all of this that's going on. And you got a lot of people on scene looking for work. So just after this order, the driver and a firefighter from Truck 6 went to the roof to start ventilation at 1958 hours. Interesting that they're ventilating the roof on this style of building. So
Yeah.
Battalion Chief 11 arrived on the scene at 1958 hours. So this is 8 minutes after the first truck arrived. And he was then given command of the CD sector. So he's in that back corner. So Battalion Chief 11 was approached by a store employee who informed them that the store manager might still be inside. Uh-oh.
Yep. Just things got serious here. So there's a little note here in the report that says, in fact, the store manager was not inside. Rescue 2 arrived at the scene at 1959 hours and was assigned as the rapid intervention team on the Alpha side. So everything's based on the Alpha side. Now we need to remember here, this is 2003. This is before ULSFRI and all the research into the ventilation and fire behavior and the modern firefight. So we can't blame these guys for following those traditional practices because that's what they knew. That's what we were all taught. Right? Ventilate it, it'll cool the fire down, et cetera, et cetera. But in this kind of building, it's questionable. And this might have been before Charleston. What year was Charleston? 07 or something. Yeah. Lieutenant 26 radioed Engine 31 for lines to be charged. Both nozzles were opened and directed towards the office area, which knocked down the fire behind the rear wall as it started to roll across the ceiling from the Bravo Charlie corner. Victim number 2 was requested to be relieved on the nozzle by firefighter from Engine 27, who was backing him up on the hand line.
Remember now that this partition wall at the back of the store, which was part of the office, did not go all the way to the roof.
Yeah, the ceiling was open in the back.
Common. With the
it's
front
believed that victim number 2 took a position behind the nozzleman to assist with the operation of the hand line. So for some reason he didn't want to be in the front and he went to the second position. This is the last time victim number 2 was seen until he was removed from the building. Victim number 1 came up to Engine 27 firefighter and directed him to bring the line into the storeroom, so the nozzle. They experienced intense heat when they entered the storeroom. When the hand line was opened, they heard electrical popping sounds from the ceiling area. At approximately the same time, a firefighter from Truck 11 was attempting to pull ceiling tiles with a 6-foot pike pole when the fire flared into the void space and blew an area of the suspended ceiling and air vents downward onto the areas below. So as soon as he put some oxygen in there, that was full of hot combustible gases, and there was enough oxygen then for it to light up. So it was probably a fuel-rich atmosphere in the ceiling from the stuff in the storeroom that went into the ceiling, and then when they gave it oxygen, it went boom.
Right.
Like
And
I say
actually, the
again,
note,
guys.
yeah. Actually, the note here says that the ceiling collapsed on the crews below. So, so you can imagine these 2 by 2 panels getting blown out and all crashing down on your head. And
Yep.
yeah, they're lightweight, but they're not zero weight.
Yeah, it is believed that it was a possible backdraft explosion that took place when the ceiling tiles were open, as they induced the oxygen into that fuel-rich atmosphere. And I say it again, guys. You go into something like this, you got smoke. You're not sure what you got. You're before you go to the back of the store, pop a ceiling tile down. It's minimal damage. It's a little hole in the ceiling. If there's nothing in there, great. If there's something in there, then you know it. Same with if you go to a house fire and you suspect a fire in the basement, or you're not sure where the fire is, open the closet door inside the front door of the house, take your saw and make a little triangle kerf cut and see what's in the floor. See what you got underneath you before you go in there with your hose line. The house is burning anyway. If you already got a problem, don't be shy with checking out to see what, and use your thermal imaging camera, which comes up later in the recommendations.
Right.
But getting off topic
Also, I
here.
believe the second in engine had been assigned to open the door on the Charlie side, right? So
The
they
truck.
don't. Yeah. Oh, it could have been. Yeah.
It was
Um,
the truck.
so was the back door on the Charlie side open at this time? So
Don't
that
know.
door actually is in the storage room.
Yeah.
So it would have been probably relatively close to the office. So was that door actually opened? That would have been also contributing oxygen into the fire area. Also as a potential way of escaping. But most of these stock rooms at the back, for those of us who have been back there and tend to be back there, because that's often where issues are, they're generally just a mess. They're stock and they're just piled right up to the ceiling with cardboard boxes and open boxes and just stuff everywhere. And if you can walk from one end of it to the other in your bunker gear, you're doing good.
Yeah. A target rich environment for fire inspectors is what I call it. Yeah, because I teach fire inspections.
Yes, okay. You
Vic,
pile it up against the electrical panel while you're doing it.
exactly. Yeah, and the everything else, and the battery charger for the car, and the whatever.
Yeah, we're laughing,
Um,
but in the reality is this is a firefighter trap.
yeah, it is. Yeah, exactly. Victim number one made a radio transmission ordering everyone to back out of the store. Now remember, they're 100 feet back because they came in the front door. Intense heat and flames were coming from the ceiling area and forced the crews from Truck 11, the lieutenant and 2 firefighters, and Engine 26, lieutenant and firefighter, to back out of the store. At approximately the same time, victim number 1 and the firefighter from Engine 27, who was on the nozzle, if you remember, were knocked to their knees by falling debris. At 20:02 hours, 12 minutes after the arrival, victim number 1 called for help by stating, "Mayday, Mayday, Engine 31, I'm trapped inside," and a low air alarm could be heard in the background during this transmission. It is believed that a partial roof collapse occurred at this time.
Now it's interesting, because in these retail environments, your roof, if it collapsed, would have possibly taken down that partition wall at the back or parts of it, which is a concrete block wall. Your roof would have landed on all your retail shelving and other partitions, which tend to run front to back in the building. And your roof trusses would tend to run the narrow way, which would be crossways, if you will, from the Bravo to the Delta side. Usually the trusses tend to be the shortest way, but on columns, they might have been running from front to back in that building. So if they ran from front to back, they could have fallen down between the retail shelving. If they ran from the Bravo to the Charlie side, to the Delta side, they could have landed crossways on top of the shelving. So we don't know how that landed. So, not only might you have had the block wall coming down on the firefighters, you might have had the trusses partially and the suspended ceiling and the retail shelving landing on your firefighters who were down in these dollar store alleyways are no more than 6 feet wide. And so you're not in a very large space and all of this stuff's coming in on top of you. It's really a firefighter death trap if you have a ceiling collapse or any other kind of a major issue going on in there. High heat, uh, high, you're in a flow path, you can't see, um, you lose track of where the front of the building is, you've got collapsing stuff that's trapping you. And one of the things they do in firefighter training that we do in firefighter training is they put you in a maze full of wires and stuff and see if you can maneuver your way through all of that. And again, this is really training you to survive a suspended ceiling um, collapse. It's all part of that. Yep. Overall, a very dangerous situation. So it's believed that a partial roof collapse had happened at about this time when the Mayday was sounded. So the IC immediately deployed the RIT team and called for a second alarm at that time. Division Chief 1 arrived on the scene at 20:03 hours. So this is 13 minutes after the first arriving unit. And he assumed incident command while Battalion Chief 2 took over fireground operations. Truck 6 forced open the rear door at 20:03 hours. So the Mayday was at 20:02 hours. So actually that rear door was not open at the time that everybody got into trouble. So the CD Sector Command did not hear the Mayday call and requested additional manpower to search for the store manager, still thinking that there was somebody inside. So Victim 1, who was the lieutenant, requested to buddy breathe from Engine 27 Firefighters SCBA. The Engine 27 firefighter stated that he was also low on air as his low air alarm was sounding. Decision was made to follow the hand line out of the structure. So this is before the Mayday, I'm guessing. The decision was made to follow the hand line out of the structure. So, and as I'd already talked about how difficult that was going to be, here it says their path was impeded by the partial collapse and their hose line was buried under large piles of debris in the aisles.
Yep, same as Phoenix, same as Charleston.
Yeah.
Is there over 100 feet into a building and all the stuff's buried? They cannot follow the hose line. How do we get out? And it's dark and black and hot.
Yeah, exactly as I was saying, is likely to be a problem and is entirely foreseeable when you decide to stretch your line in the front door like that and use that as your major access and egress path, that if things go south, you're going to have a lot of trouble getting out of there. And
And
that,
at least if you do that, put another line at the door, a nozzle, a big nozzle, and a line at the door so that you can protect that passageway.
yes. So we talked about this in another incident there where two firefighters got trapped on the second floor of an abandoned building. And we were talking about maintaining orientation and other ways of knowing where you are and finding your way out. And this is a case where you're following the hose line and you probably don't have a plan B for getting oriented and getting out, and that's a problem. So anyway, the hose line was buried under large piles of debris in those aisles, and those aisles would be narrow. So keep in mind there's also probably a cash system and counters at the front of the store also, generally quite close to the door. So it would be easy to become disoriented there too. And nowadays, of course, it's got self-service caches and there's, like one alley that takes you through this winding serpentine candy aisle before as you're waiting for the cash. So it's extra difficult to find your way out. And even though there's an entrance and an exit door, the exit door is actually completely blocked off by the cash system to make sure that you don't exit with an armload of stuff you didn't pay for. So it's even doubly more important. And if it means putting a crew in place to clear all that crap out of the way so you can guarantee that your other crew can get out, then that's what you do. You cause some damage, it's more important to get your crew out safely. Anyway, I get off my pulpit here. The firefighter was crawling over the debris with Victim 1 holding onto his boot. A piece of webbing would have been a good idea, perhaps, here. So the firefighter from Engine 27 heard a call for help off to his left side as they crawled over the pile. So there's at least a third firefighter who's having difficulties. The RIT team entered the front of the store and ran into Lieutenant 26, who was on his feet but out of air. So this is possibly the other guy. They removed him from the store thinking that he was the firefighter who had radioed the distress call. The IC called for a personal accountability report, a PAR report, at 20:07 hours. So this is 17 minutes into the incident after they've arrived, and determined that the firefighter who made the distress call was still inside and the RIT re-entered. So good on them for having an accountability system that could identify that. That's good. That's not what we see all the time. The fire, especially, we're talking 21 years ago. The
Hmm.
firefighter from engine 27 made it over the pile of debris. Remember, the lieutenant is hanging on to him by his boot, literally, over the pile of debris, and then ran out of air. He was already on low alarm, remember? He was struggling to remain conscious when he saw a light, called out for help. The RIT had found him and carried him out. The IC called for another PAR and confirmed that there were still 2 firefighters now missing. RIT entered the third time, but the rear of the retail area was blocked by the roof collapse. The RIT was driven out by intense heat and then advised command that the fire needed to be knocked down before they were able to re-enter. What a disaster.
Yep. That's why you want to have a nice blitz monitor right at the front door. Yes, your guys are still in there, but if you don't cool it down, they're dying anyway. So that might give you a chance to cool it down.
Yeah. Big
Although you're
stream.
bringing with a smoothbore nozzle, not with a fog nozzle, because you're going to entrain a bunch of air.
Plus, you're never getting in 100 feet with a fog. There's no question. And if you need
No,
air
right.
in the back, you can take out your big windows in the front. It's a perfect place to go with the low level aerial. There's a lot of things you can talk about. I know you're concerned about your crew that's inside, and the basic rule. You got people in a building. Don't put big streams into the building, and all these things. But you're in a situation now where it's desperation, right? You've got seconds, minute maybe to save your guys. You've got to pull out all the
And the
stops.
and the fastest monitor to ever be deployed is the ladder truck, the platform. Lift it out of the bed, turn it to the side, open the nozzle, and drown that building. 2,000 gallons a minute right now. It's quick, it's easy. I teach firefighters to do that. Everybody says you're crazy. No, it's a monitor.
But hopefully you've got a water supply established. Your
Right.
other alternative, of course, is you've got an engine out front with a deck gun, most likely.
Yep.
So whether that was low enough to get under the canopy or not, we don't know. Whether it was positioned adequately, we don't know. So
But those are all things that command needs to be thinking about when you show up at one of these fires. Be ready. Have
before
a
need,
plan B. Have a plan C. What do I do if
yeah, yeah.
the two
Again,
members from
we're in
go
our
ahead.
armchair talking here.
We are. It's easy from where we're sitting. And we've been to lots of these fires and we've learned by mistakes.
Yeah.
Experience is expensive. The 2 members from Truck 6 made 2 entries into the storeroom through the rear Charlie side door, searching for the store manager. Remember, they were still on that search.
Yeah.
As they were exiting the second time, they heard a pass alarm sounding near the wall separating the retail area from the storeroom. The crew went for the wall and made their way to a door leading into the store. There was only one man door. They determined there was 2 pass alarm devices sounding on the other side of the wall, in the back of the store, if you will. They found victim number 2 just inside the storeroom and notified command that they'd found a firefighter at 2013 hours. Victim number 2 was transported to a local hospital where he passed away the next day. 2 firefighters on the roof from Truck 6 reported a large roof sag at 2014 hours, with a fire extending through the roof on the Bravo side. They immediately exited the roof, having completed only a partial ventilation hole. Additional attempts were made to rescue victim number 1. However, with conditions worsening, it was decided to go to defensive attack. The command sounded the evacuation horns at 2024 hours. Crew members formed a rescue group and breached a hole in the Bravo side wall. Remember, this store was deeper than the other Bravo exposures, so they could get at that area where they suspected where the office was and where they suspected the lieutenant was near. At 2100 hours, they got that wall through the Bravo side wall, which, hey, concrete block, it's not that hard to breach. Victim 1 was removed and placed in an ambulance through that entry, that breach, at approximately 2026 hours and transported to local hospital where he was pronounced dead, unfortunately. Recommendations and discussions.
Recommendation 1 coming out of the NIOSH report. Fire departments should ensure that the first arriving company officer does not become involved in firefighting efforts when assuming the role of incident command. We've talked about this before. Firefighter safety starts with a strong command presence. In this incident, smoke coming from the roof and inside the building required the command mode of operation. there were quite a number of resources that landed on scene here within a
Hmm.
minute or two of the first unit. So I know there's people out there that are going to say, "Ah, you got to be mobile command and all this other thing," and that is correct if you're like the lone engine, you're Johnny on the spot. But in this
Right.
case,
Yeah.
we had
There's a place for everything.
2 engines, 3 engines, 2 trucks, a rescue truck. So all arrived very quickly within the first minute or two. So again, um, not thinking that there was a serious incident going on here. In my opinion, that's what I read into this. So firefighter safety starts with a strong command presence. In this incident, smoke coming from the roof and from inside the building required the command mode of operation. In other words, if you got smoke above and smoke below, there's definitely a fire somewhere. So the first arriving officer initiated command mode by declaring command of the incident over the radio and reporting smoke coming from the roof and inside the building. However, command was never really established, and the first arriving officer was actually operating in the nothing showing mode. In other words, mobile command. Command was mobile, which means you're basically seeing the incident as what's in front of your face. You're not seeing the incident, you're just seeing what you're focused on at the moment. To effectively coordinate and direct firefighting operations at the scene, it is essential that the IC, the incident commander, does not become involved in firefighting efforts. Remember, he was the first guy who went right to the back of the store and opened the door where the fire was.
With another officer. He could
Yeah,
have easily designated that officer and a firefighter to go do that while
yeah,
he got stuff set up.
yeah. This is a guy with 11 years of experience, so not a massive amount of experience.
Right. Yeah.
He's a
For an
lieutenant.
officer, that's not
Yeah.
lots.
So he's a lieutenant. He's basically a junior officer, what in a
Hmm.
lot of departments would call an acting captain.
Yeah.
So essentially not a hugely experienced. In fact, in my department, you couldn't become an acting captain before 10 years at least. So so junior as an officer, although a fairly experienced firefighter. So 11 years of being a firefighter, he was in firefighter mode. This is what was going on.
Exactly. It's pretty normal. Yep, I know.
Yeah.
That's I when I teach incident command, I tell people it's like that you have it's tough to change from that do it yourself to organize and manage instead of do it yourself.
Yeah, and I know after the fire, you're standing outside with your radio giving instructions, and you're all clean and not smelly and never used any air. And your crew, when you get back to the station, they give you a hard time over you. Yeah, and look at you standing out there. Well, we did
With
all
your
the work,
clipboard.
Yeah, we got all dirty and you with your clipboard, right? Says, yeah,
Yeah.
well, you're an officer, man. You got to take that. It's part of the job. So,
Yeah.
and this demonstrates one of the reasons why.
Where's Doug when we need him?
Yeah. Yeah, to effectively coordinate and direct firefighting operations on the scene, it is essential that the IC does not become involved in firefighting efforts. A delay in establishing an effective command post may result in confusion of assignments, lack of personnel, and apparatus coordination, which may contribute to rapid fire progression. In other words, incoming crews will be freelancing because there's not enough direction. You've got options: pass command or stay outside. You could just give the next in officer, it's yours, take command. And I mean, he's less than a minute behind you. That's possible. So there were options. Anyway, lack of personnel and apparatus coordination may contribute to rapid fire progression. The involvement of the initial IC in firefighting also hampers the communications of essential information as command is transferred to later arriving officers. So
That
interest,
big picture.
interesting they comment that, because one of the things is they're looking for the manager of the store who's in the office. Now they could have told you that there's nobody in the office that's of any surviving at all because the office was
Right.
engulfed in fire. So that should have pretty well put paid to that idea pretty quickly, but it does not appear to have been communicated for quite some time. We've
Yeah.
got reports of other crews still searching for this mysterious guy who's actually not in the building.
Yeah. They didn't have a picture from inside because he was command, so he saw the fire and he didn't relate that to anybody else. That transfer of command might have been
Yeah,
a bit weak.
yeah. So he was searching for the fire, and then he opened the door, made a serious error by not controlling the door, and now is in one of those holy shit modes.
Yep.
And so,
Where's my hose line?
right. So coordinating the rest of what was going on at that fire was the last thing in his mind at that time.
Yep. Recommendation number 2, fire department should ensure that incident commander conducts an initial size-up and a risk assessment of the incident scene before beginning interior firefighting operations. Amongst the most important duties of the first officer on the scene is conducting that initial size-up of the incident. This should also include assessments of risk versus gain in incident operations. The main structural danger associated with a Type 2 construction is roof collapse. The roofing system is supported by steel bar joists and usually consists of a corrugated steel roof deck, a layer of felt paper, foam insulation, and asphalt waterproofing. Knowledge about the type of construction, the age of the building, and whether or not modifications or additions have been completed provides the incident commander with information on how the building may hold up under fire conditions if the building is generally subject to collapse under these same fire conditions. For example, truss systems can fail quickly after being exposed to fire. Steel has no fire resistance and will fail when heated to temperatures that are routinely attained by any regular fire. The unprotected steel bar joist can collapse after 5 to 10 minutes of exposure to fire. The temperature at which steel fails is 1100 degrees Fahrenheit. Temperatures of 1000 degrees Fahrenheit can be reached within the first 5 minutes of a fire, and 1300 degrees can be attained within 10 minutes. Interior size-up is just as important as exterior size-up. Since the incident commander is staged at the command post outside, interior conditions should be communicated to the incident commander as soon as possible. Interior conditions could change the incident commander's strategy or tactics. For example, heavy smoke is emitting from the exterior roof system. But if the firefighters can't find the fire in the interior, it's a good possibility that the fire is above them in that roof system. There's also warning signs of a backdraft that can be observed or relayed to the incident commander. Dense black smoke, puffing smoke around door frames, discolored glass, or a reverse flow of smoke back inside the building. It's important for the incident commander to immediately obtain this type of information to help make proper decisions. Department should ensure that the first officer or firefighter inside the structure evaluates the interior condition and reports them back to the IC immediately.
I'm not sure that in this fire there would have been a huge amount of signs of a potential backdraft.
Yeah, I agree. It didn't, they
Level.
had smoke on the roof and smoke inside a little bit.
What you would see is if you pull down enough of those ceiling tiles and you had a good flashlight or something and you looked up in there, you wouldn't be able to see the underside of the deck. It would
Right.
be
The
full,
smoke would
full of
obscure it.
brown and black smoke, and you would
Yeah.
start to see, maybe not coming down through the suspended ceiling area, or level, I should say, but above that you would see a lot of, rolling smoke, and that would be your indication. And then somebody opening a door somewhere or providing some ventilation, or just opening the office door and letting, a sudden increase in fire. Well, that sudden increase in fire puts pressure up into that suspended ceiling. And so when the pressure goes on there, then all that combustible smoke starts pouring out of there, and it's followed by fire and oxygen. So it's going to light up. So you would only have a very short period of time to react, I think. And again, how important it is to have your inspection holes, right? Pulling ceiling tiles here and there.
Smoke is fuel.
Smoke is fuel. So recommendation 3 coming out of the NIOSH investigation, fire departments should conduct pre-incident planning and inspections for mercantile and business occupancies. Vincent Dunn, who's now a retired deputy chief of New York, I think he was, states in Command and Control of Fires and Emergencies, most firefighters who die fighting fires perish in residential occupancies. This is a statistical matter. More fires occur in residences. However, when we examine the number of firefighter deaths per fire, we see that commercial occupancies are more dangerous to firefighting personnel. A study by the NFPA from 1989 to 1993, NFPA, right, the National Fire Protection Association. So from 1989 to 1993, a study revealed that 3.1 firefighters die in every 100,000 resident occupancy fires, and that 11.6 firefighters die for every 100,000 non-residential occupancy fires, such as stores, offices, and warehouses. So let's
Wow.
make those numbers. You are, yeah, 4 times, almost 4 times. So a lot of firefighters die in residential fires because there are a lot of residential fires, but you're 4 times more likely or as likely to die in a non-residential fire and a commercial fire because they're more
So
dangerous. They're bigger.
yeah, they're more
There's
dangerous. Yeah.
fuel. It's more. It's much easier to get disoriented. Your exit paths are much longer. They say you can't survive a backdraft, but if you're standing 1 foot inside the door when the backdraft happens right next to you, you'll probably survive it. If you're 100 feet into the building and there's a backdraft, you're toast,
Yep.
literally.
Exactly. Yeah.
So yeah,
Unfortunately, yeah. Too bad. Too bad some of our co-hosts don't believe in statistics, like yellow trucks are safer. It's statistics. So I just had to throw that in there.
well,
Hopefully they listen.
I thought you were gonna talk about the Oilers game. Never mind. Um,
Oh, yikes.
so
That's
pre-incident
tonight.
planning. Yeah, pre-incident planning is a useful tool for identifying hazards and how to address them before an incident occurs in a commercial building. The pre-incident plan should not be confused with fire inspections, which monitor code compliance. Not the same thing. Sometimes your fire inspection personnel have, and nowadays in particular, do not have firefighting skills. They may not see the building the same way that your frontline firefighters see them. So don't get those two things confused, although both of you can do a little bit of that other job. Anyway, so they're not to be confused. Pre-incident planning assumes an incident will occur. What did we say earlier? When you go to an incident, assume there's a
Expect
fire.
fire. I'm a firefighter. I'm driving a red truck. Expect fire.
What did they call me for in the first place?
Yeah.
Pre-incident planning assumes an incident will occur and is one of the most valuable tools available for aiding responding personnel in effectively controlling an emergency. So I'll add a
Yep.
couple things to this if you hear my voice for another minute. Um, you should pre-incident plan this type of building as well as pre-incident planning this specific building. I think knowing that this is a dollar store and will be crammed with a lot of small items, flammable items, this is a different fire than you might expect in a building that sells sofas. It's a different fire than you might expect in a building that's selling bolts and nuts, even though the building itself may be exactly the same. So I think you've got different risks there, and that's why it's very important. The other thing when you're doing pre-planning, I think you should be thinking about arson fires because it's not unusual to have arson fires around these types of structures. Most often it's in the dumpster out back, but in this case, it was in the office. So not only did you have an office fire, you had an arson fire. So this fire was well advanced, obviously, on arrival of the fire department in that area. They don't really discuss how the fire was discovered, do they, Paul? I didn't see that in.
Yeah, I think later on
Okay.
there was the store manager was charged anyway. I don't know if he was found guilty. I think he was, but anyway, of lighting a fire in the office to cover up some theft
Yeah.
of funds.
But the fact they got here and this door was locked, obviously the store was closed.
Yeah, yeah,
So you must expect a delayed alarm. So you
uh-huh.
must expect that the fire would be more advanced than would have been the case if there had been patrons in the store and somebody's, I smell smoke,
Mm-hmm.
and they
Mm-hmm.
called the fire department. So, the situation, it's an evening, the store is closed, it's locked up, visible smoke from the exterior, expect a more advanced fire on arrival, um, expect fire.
Yeah. Speaking of pre-incident planning, I just wanted to make a little plug here for an app that I had bought. There's all kinds of apps for this kind of stuff to make it easier. There's a company out of Ottawa, Canada, that called APX Data that developed a pre-incident planning application. It works on an iPad, and you can do inspections with it as well, and you can do other stuff with it. Fire reporting, I think they're getting into, but really, it was made for pre-incident planning, and it makes it super easy for firefighters driving around their area to do pre-incident plans. It takes a picture from Google Earth or something, and it pops it in there, and you can mark any significant stuff you want on it, and it's data shared automatically across all the devices you have with the application for your municipality. So that's something to look into. I actually got a grant from Factory Mutual to buy the iPads and the application and get us going for a few years. Fort Saskatchewan, I don't know if they're still using it or not, but we had tried it out. And I just read somewhere the state of Nebraska, I think it is, has adopted it for all their inspections and pre-incident planning and stuff like that. So something to think of that's out there.
So
But
one of the
however you do it, however you do it's important. I used to do pre-incident planning at our factories in Fort Saskatchewan and stuff, and it wasn't very serious pre-incident planning, but all I did was send the crews to visit once every few years each industrial site, and just go in there, drive around, walk around, talk to the people. I called it, pre-incident planning by osmosis, where at least you've been to the place, you might have seen a fire hydrant, you might have seen their fire pump, just so you know a little bit about what's going on, to not to be confused with an inspection, which is a totally different thing.
Yeah. But one of the advantages of using a computer-based program like that, or any formalized pre-inspection program, is that it's in a consistent format,
Mm-hmm.
and
Yep.
it's a lot like looking in the TDG book, right, or the orange book. All your hazards are presented in a standardized format, so you know right where to look for the particular thing, and anything that's different tends to stand out. So it's important from that perspective, I think, in addition to doing pre-incident planning, to do it properly.
And one of the reports here that I have on this incident, the last line was, remember the sacrifice of Lieutenant Kirk and Private Zachary, which are our victim 1 and 2, by conducting pre-incident planning survey of mercantile occupancies within your district. So that's a way to remember these people, and the terrible sacrifice is by doing some pre-incident planning. It behooves us to protect ourselves by doing that. So I just wanted to pass that on. That was in the Fire Rescue or Rescue One newsletter or article on this incident. So I thought that
Yeah.
was worth
Well,
touching on.
if we fail to do this, we're disrespecting what happened.
Yeah, yeah, and history's repeating itself, right? Recommendation number 4: fire department should ensure that ventilation is closely coordinated with fire attack. The incident commander should determine if and where ventilation is needed during size up. The type of ventilation should be determined based on the evaluation of the structure, the conditions upon arrival, and the information outlined by the pre-incident plan. Vertical ventilation in buildings consisting of Type 2 construction, including a roof system supported by steel bar joists, should not be attempted if the trusses may have been exposed to fire. Upon arrival of the fire department, the trusses had not been exposed to fire due to the fire consuming the oxygen where it was contained in the office. In this incident, vertical ventilation was attempted, but canceled by the roof crew for fear of collapse after the trusses were exposed to fire. So they saved it. That was good. That's great.
Good
This is way
feed on that.
before, and it's before ULFSRI and stuff like that, where a lot of vertical ventilation is not necessarily effective. Take the training, learn about it. You have to make a really big hole to let enough fire out to cool the space underneath. And when they have a door at the front and a door at the back, why bother? Ventilate through the building. The
10,000 square
ventilation,
foot building too. So I mean, this
yeah,
is a big building,
it,
a lot of airspace
it's a
in.
lot of air in there. And we underestimate how big commercial buildings are. We have that residential mindset, right? The ventilation crew did not have a saw blade that would cut through the metal decking. It's critical that we have the available and properly know how to use the correct tools to carry out ventilation. Pre-incident plans are developed and followed to determine what tools might be needed and complete the assigned tasks. In most cases, building of Type 2 construction will have metal roof decks. This is similar to the Boyle Street fire in LA. And they went in there. They're up on the roof cutting holes. The guys go in the front door, and the place is a bomb. And 3 firefighters were severely injured trying to get off the roof. LA City, they ventilate every roof. It's just their tradition. There's a great 45-minute video on YouTube about Boyle Street fire. Watch and learn. The same kind of thing. And the thing went up, and they couldn't put it out.
Yeah. And honestly, there was nothing to save. The risk
For
in
what
this
for?
building of this fire was the firefighters inside.
Yep.
That was the risk at this building.
Yep.
Now, it's reasonable that they would have been concerned about exposure B1, and there's techniques that could have been used there to help protect that exposure. But we didn't in here hear whether they actually entered exposure B1 and actually pulled ceiling tiles and observed the party wall between the two buildings to see if fire was communicating or anything like that, which would normally be one of the first things the IC would do, and certainly is what I used to do. Yeah, I'm sorry about your store, but it's going to be a lot worse when it burns. So, but you got to do the things you got to do. That's why you're the fire department. That's why you have the powers that you have. So, anyways, recommendation number 5, again coming from the NIOSH investigation. Fire departments should ensure that firefighters immediately open ceilings and other concealed spaces wherever a fire is suspected of being in a truss system. And as I was just saying, that includes in exposure buildings that are intimately connected with the first building. So discussion further on this is firefighters may
And
have.
before you get into
Go ahead.
that, and
Yeah.
sorry, concealed space wherever it is suspected of being in a truss system. All your modern houses, the floor is a truss system, and you need to know that. So get your chainsaw and make a little triangle in the closet. They can fix it. Insurance will pay for it. But I mean, you need to know if it's a truss floor. You got to know. One of the fire departments here nearby, they walked in the front door. Both firefighters fell through the floor. Luckily, the officer was standing right there and he caught them. Right? That would have been the same kind of thing. So, same thing. If it's a concealed space in a truss system, you must know what's happening in there. Sorry, got off my soapbox here.
Yeah, but when they're constructing homes in new neighborhoods, get out of your truck, walk around the site, have a look at what they're doing. Are they I-beam trusses? Are they what they call silent floor trusses? What's going in those buildings? And are those trusses, for instance, are they finished basements? Are they enclosed? And I'm talking residential now. That all has an impact on how long that truss is going to be sustainable. Anyway, firefighters may have difficulty in finding the exact location of fire in a building. The bigger the building, the harder the fire is to find sometimes, particularly if there's only small amounts of smoke. Even though in some fires there may be heavy smoke that makes it clear that there is a fire present. Fire or heavy smoke from the roof suggests that the fire could be in concealed areas of the roof system. The design of suspended ceiling panels does provide a void space between the ceiling and the roof in which fire can hide and allows hot gases to accumulate, which may ignite when oxygen is introduced. When a truss is suspected to be above a ceiling, firefighters should use a pike pole or other tools to open up the ceiling immediately and check for truss construction. Any ceiling below a truss void should be pulled and examined by firefighters while standing near the entry doorway so that they can make a rapid escape if necessary. When opening ceilings or other concealed spaces, it's important to have charged hose lines at the ready. So not out on the street, not on the truck, in the door right next to the firefighters. If there is a fire barrier in the void, the same procedure should take place on the opposite side. So in this case, we had a block wall across the back of the retail section of the store. However, this block wall did not go all the way to the roof, it told us. It's a common space with the storage area. How would you know that as a firefighter? Well, you pull a ceiling tile on one side of the block wall and you look at it. And if it's open, then essentially the block wall does not exist. It's open right across. If the block wall did go all the way to the ceiling, then you'd have to go through the door into the storage space, pull a ceiling tile there to see what the conditions on that side were. I don't think they ever actually got that far in this case. It is important to have charged hose lines ready if there's a fire barrier in the void, in other words, going up through the ceiling space to a roof or to the next platform. The same procedure should take place on the opposite side of that barrier. If the fire emerges behind the firefighter, egress may be cut off. So you're at the back of the store messing around and the fire comes out of the ceiling space behind you at the front of the store, you've got a problem. So you may be cut off, and that may lead to the possibility of entrapment. Firefighters need to be aware of their location in relation to the nearest exit and also be aware of the location of other firefighters in the area. The IC must consider and provide for alternative egress routes from all locations where firefighters are operating. So I talked earlier about shelving, the retail shelving, and that applies to other things besides that, like stores. Like you go into your Walmart and there's a section that's all clothing racks, for instance. Very difficult to get out or through a place like that with zero visibility after stuff starts falling and moving. Just dragging your hose through that area can cause these things to fall over. So retail space environments are exceedingly dangerous as firefighter traps. You need to be really aware of that and don't depend on your hose line as your way out. Have your ticks, have other ways of getting out, have somebody at the doorway orienting you. They used to sell devices, right, that made noises and flashlights and but there's all kinds of other ways to do it. So you need to have
Yes.
an SOP.
Saskatoon used to have a box that the shops built, and it was a box with a battery, and it had a loudspeaker and a light on it, and they would put it at the door, and that was their find the exit path box. And I thought, that was a cool invention. Maybe it might help, but of course the ladder platform basket sitting right in front of the window with the big floodlights on and the monitor would also help you find your way out. Maybe.
Useless if you don't train.
Exactly. Recommendation number 6, fire departments should ensure that firefighters performing firefighting operations under or above trusses are evacuated as soon as it's determined that the trusses are exposed to fire. Even though standard fire engineering calculations show that lightweight trusses may be expected to collapse as soon as 6 to 13 minutes after exposure in a fully developed fire, it is not recommended to set a time limit on working under or above burning trusses because you have no idea when the fire started. When is it determined that the trusses have been exposed to fire, any firefighters operating under or above them should immediately be evacuated. If it is not clear that the trusses have been exposed to fire, a defensive attack should take place until conditions can be verified. It's
So
just a
it's
store.
Yeah. So it's exactly just a store. Risk benefit analysis. Also, it was possible to fight this fire from the exterior. There are doors in the back, at least the one, and there was lots of windows in the front. So you could have put substantial quantities of water into the store without having anybody inside at all. But what's the other risk of this building? And that would be the risk that with your steel bar joists and so forth, that you would push an exterior wall out
Yeah,
because those trusses are sitting on these pads socketed into that wall. And I've seen the
they
walls,
expand.
they expand because they got hot. And when steel gets hot, it gets longer and it starts to push. And so you can push the wall out. So you have to be cognizant of your collapse zones.
Yeah, that
Also,
the delta side would have been a risk. Yeah.
yeah, the delta side would have been a risk. Also, on the alpha side, you had a canopy,
Yep.
and the canopy was supported by poles on the one side. What was supporting it on the other side? The front face of the building. And
Yeah.
what was above the canopy? There was this area that had siding above it, right?
Yeah.
So
The truss
you had,
probably went all the way out.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what could have potentially happened is the truss could have pushed that upper, not really a parapet, but an upper area of the wall down on top of the canopy, and the canopy could have come right down on people who were standing underneath of it on the sidewalk. In other words, firefighters. So
Yep.
you got to be concerned about those things and plan for them. Plan B, plan C. If the building can collapse, it will. Anyway, recommendation 7. Fire departments should consider using a thermal imaging camera as part of the size-up operation to aid in locating fires in concealed areas. So just some discussion on this. Thermal imaging cameras are being used more frequently by the fire service. In 2003, they certainly were being used. One function of the camera is to locate the heat or the fire source. Infrared thermal cameras assist firefighters in quickly getting the crucial information that they need about the location of the heat source, which is generally the seat of the fire, from the exterior of the structure, probably not in this case, but possibly, so that they can then plan an effective and rapid response with the entire emergency team. The use of a thermal imaging camera may provide additional information the incident commander can use during the initial size-up. Thermal imaging cameras should be used in a timely manner and firefighters should be properly trained in their use and be aware of their limitations. I don't
Yep.
know that the incident commander did a 360 on this fire.
Yeah, it doesn't talk about it at any point.
So
Maybe some of the subsequent chiefs that came in maybe drove around the back.
well, we know there was a
We don't
guy
know.
at the CD corner, so he got to
Yeah,
see a couple sides for sure, three
right.
sides for sure. But would a thermal imaging camera have assisted in locating that fire through a
Inside the
block wall?
store, inside it would have, but
Yes.
yeah. Yeah, my friend Manfred Keene, former coworker, the Bullard guy. Yeah, and that's what he does all day long. That's his full-time job, is training firefighters how to use cameras and use them better to make it safer for firefighters.
Yeah. I mean, I know in the latter days of my career, we had a lot of thermal imaging units. Every truck had one for sure, and there was a
Yep.
few extras kicking around. But I would have to honestly say I don't know if we ever did what I would now consider adequate training in how to use them.
Yeah.
Using them tactically.
hmm
I don't know if we ever used them, to actually contribute to incident command. I don't know that we did that.
We were
That
just
type of
starting
training.
to. Yep.
Yeah.
In addition, NIOSH had added another note at the end of the report, not as a recommendation, but talks about municipalities should consider requiring specific building construction information on exterior placards. So here we go again, just like in Baltimore, where they have the condemned buildings. They've reinvigorated that program now after they lost the three guys a few years ago, and that's one of the recommendations. They put an X on any condemned buildings in Baltimore City. This one here is specifically regarding to building construction and the lightweight trusses. Information can save the incident commander time when planning a fire attack, can provide firefighters with important information that they might not otherwise have. However, the presence of building construction placards should not preclude doing pre-incident planning and inspections. At minimum, buildings could be marked with a triangle or the letter T on the outside of the building to warn firefighters of the presence of trusses. And this was a big push years ago. I think it's kind of fallen off now because so much stuff is trusses, but it is important. Ensure firefighters are aware of structures that might have a truss roof. The state of New Jersey passed a law requiring all building owners to place exterior placards on structures which incorporate a truss roof, which I think it's a good idea. Like right away, you look at it, say, okay, truss roof, here you go. We were using apps, in the trucks to solar panels, batteries, oxygen, same kind of thing. You could have it on the app. It shows up right in the computer when you're driving to the fire and says, "Hey, truss roof." But
But only if you pre-planned the building,
right. Otherwise, you don't know
right? So
unless
I'm
it's law.
yeah. My only concern about this is that, and you said it already, so many buildings have have truss roofs or even truss floor
Or truss
supports, right?
floors. Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think being able to put a marker on every building is unrealistic,
maybe.
and
Yeah.
it leads to you driving up to the 10% of the buildings because you've got a really good program that don't have it on and that actually are, and you're
hmm
standing there. Well, this is not a truss roof, even though it looks like one, and you're wrong. It is. So that's my concerns there. I would far rather see much more emphasis put on building construction for the fire services. Frank Brannigan and Vinnie Dunn and those other guys who've spent careers trying to teach firefighters as thick as we can be about what a building is, how a building is built, and why it's
Yep.
designed to kill you, and understanding better about, like, like I can drive down the street and pretty much tell you how every building is constructed. Pretty much, not always, but for the most part, I can. Just because they tend to be built in certain ways, and you tend to understand how they're built. And I think it's better in a general sense for firefighters to know how buildings are put together, so that they can deduce themselves what the risks are, and pre-planning, of course. So I think that's a safer approach than depending on the building owner to flag his building as a dangerous building,
Yeah.
because there's
Yeah. I agree.
lots of reasons why building owners don't want to stick a danger flag on their building.
Yeah.
Lots of
Yeah.
reasons.
Exactly.
I'm not shopping at that store; it might fall on you. Uh,
Right. Exactly. Yeah.
I can't sell my building because it's a dangerous building. You know, there's all
Hey,
kinds of reasons why they would resist that.
In an epilogue to this event, I found some news articles talking about the one of the widows of the firefighters that were killed had filed a $6.5 million lawsuit against the Memphis Fire Department and the SCBA manufacturer. The widow of the firefighter who died filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the store, the Memphis Fire Department, and the maker of the SCBA in June of 2004, so a year after the fire. The let's see, Lieutenant Trent Kirk and Private Charles Zachary were both killed on June 15th after rushing into the store. They believe the civilian was in the store, which he wasn't. Lieutenant Kirk died on the scene. Zachary died from smoke inhalation the next door. The manager of the store, Paul Shaw, is charged with setting the blaze. He's awaiting trial on federal arson charges, where the public safety officer died. If convicted, he could face life in prison. The lawsuit filed in the circuit court said her husband's death resulted in part from the store's inadequate staffing, an inaccurate floor plan, and an ineffective radio during the fire. Also, radio communication and rescue plan by the fire department was ineffective, and an inaccurate 30-minute rating on the German manufactured air tank. According to the suit, Draeger Work Company should have cautioned the tank would provide air for only about 10 minutes for a firefighter of Kirk's size, who was 6'2" and 275 pounds. Fire authorities say the fire was set by Shaw to cover up theft of money from the store's safe. Let's remember the sacrifice. I don't know. I couldn't find any results of this lawsuit later on in the media, so I don't know what happened.
It's interesting that the first truck arrived at 1950 hours, and that at 20:02 hours, so 12 minutes into the fire, into the incident, the Mayday was announced by the
Mm-hmm.
lieutenant and one. And if you remember back to the narrative, he was out of air at that time and was looking to
Mm-hmm.
buddy brief the other guy. So 12 minutes on air, if he was on air the second he arrived, which he was not, obviously.
No, he didn't. He didn't
They
put it on
walked
all the
into
way
the,
back in the
that's
store.
right, they walked into the store. So was the pack at full pressure to start with? We don't know. Chances not. Lots of times, I know it used to be a habit, when we never had a compressor, we just filled out a Cascade tanks that, so long as the bottle was more than half full, we were good,
Yeah.
and I think that this is 30 some years ago. So I look back on those days and think, oh my God,
Yep. I
the things
know.
we did, and these were
Things we
1900
did.
pound tanks in those days. They weren't
Yeah.
5,000 pound
Or
tanks.
2200. Yeah.
No, before that, the steel ones, 1960, I
I
think
don't
was.
remember 19. You're too old.
Okay, stop that, Waldorf.
Yeah, but no, that was a problem in Charleston too. Is that tanks weren't full. There's been many fires where tanks weren't full. Hey, it's a 4,500 psi tank. I want to see 4,500 pounds, or at least 44.
Yeah. So,
But
there's a
this
number
was
of things
common.
there. For instance, that you test the pack every morning. So
Yep,
you do that 5 days in a row and you've never actually used the pack.
yep.
It
You got
drops,
to
it
fill it
drops,
up.
it drops. Or you don't have a good filling procedure where you fill the pack hot and then it
Yep,
shrinks
drops
back again,
down.
so you lose a little bit, or a combination of all of those things, plus not a good SOG that says if the pack is any less than 95% of full, for instance, that you
Needs to
will
be filled.
recharge it, or a proper air pack maintenance program where you're draining and refilling the air at least quarterly for volunteer
Hmm.
departments out there. There's who don't use a lot of air a lot of the time. So all of these things. But also the thing is this was a big guy,
Hmm.
6'2", 200 and what did you say? How many pounds?
75 pounds. Yeah.
275. So not a small man.
Yeah.
So what was his personal capability on an
With
air pack?
air.
Air
You want
pack
to
was
try
not
that?
Yeah, air pack was not designed to give this man 30 minutes of air unless he was sitting still somewhere. And in this case, there was a lot of running around clearly going on, stretching lines, walking to
So
the back of the store, a few hundred feet there and back, opening doors, fighting fire, pulling ceilings, all these things that were going on in there. So, as an individual firefighter, you absolutely should know the duration of your pack when you are slugging. So
We
you should put your pack on and you should be climbing ladders, dragging hose, doing whatever exercise, running, whatever exercise you need to know what the minimum amount of time, in other words, the least amount of time that your pack will go dry on you. You need to know what that is because you
we
need
used
to expect that alarm to
we
go
used
off.
to play floor hockey in the fire station in the winter. Put all the trucks outside, leave them running to keep them warm,
Right,
and play floor hockey with our packs on, so you could
right,
see how much
right.
air you used.
And did he have a good seal when he put the pack on? Like,
Yeah,
did he have a good, was he clean shaven? We all know that that affects the amount of air leakage because even in 2003, these were positive pressure packs.
yeah, they were.
So they would be constantly pushing air out of any leak. And when you're moving around doing lots of things, your mask keeps getting jarred. So you keep losing little spurts of air here and there. So that all of that contributes to getting less endurance out of your pack. So if he got 12 minutes, uh, probably less, 10 minutes out of this pack working hard, he's probably pretty much on the money.
Hmm. Yeah, air
And
management. It's a
did
huge deal.
Did he know that when they were doing accountability, when he was in the hazard zone? Who was doing the accountability? Who was tracking the air endurance of the people that were inside when they should be looking for them to be out of air, when they should be in trouble? Now, this guy here was the lieutenant was not trapped before he ran out of air. It happened about the same time.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
he probably expired from asphyxiation or smoke inhalation.
Hmm.
Don't think
Yeah, it's a
he wasn't killed in the
thermal
right,
injury, and thermal inhalation injury.
right. So he was not
Okay,
breathing back. Anyways, interesting.
great. Well, thank you for listening to an emergency traffic podcast again. I hope you find these informative and they give you a little bit of insight into some of the things that can happen. We try to share our experience in them. Please give us a like or a thumbs up on the application you use, and please keep listening. Thanks a lot. And as Sergeant Phil Esterhaus always said on Hill Street Blues, let's be safe out there.
Let's prevent these preventable incidents because they're very tragic.
That's why we do this. Exactly.